Thank you for joining today's Education and Teaching Super Fair. My name is Taylor. I work here at Prosper and we'll be hosting today's WA Teaching and Education panel session. Before we do get started, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. In this session, we're going to hear from Yusuf and Paul at the Western Australia Department of Education, who will be giving an exciting presentation on everything you need to know about finding and applying for teaching jobs in Western Australia. It's worth mentioning if any of the students here have any questions throughout, please use the chat function and we'll look to answer some of those questions towards the end of this session. Without further ado though, I'd like to introduce Paul and Yusuf. Over to you.
Great, thanks Taylor for that amazing introduction. Yes, as Taylor mentioned, my name is Paul. My colleague Yusuf as well is with us, and we're here to chat to you today about working for Department of Education WA. Myself, I'm an ex-teacher. My colleague Yusuf is an ex-teacher as well, so we can both really share some of our experience with you and give you some really relatable advice as to working with us or working for us and also applying for jobs with the WA Public Schools. So we've only got about half an hour, so I'll do my best to get through most of this. I might touch on a few things more than others, but we'll see how we go. So we'll look at job opportunities, what we're sort of really looking for at the moment in terms of staffing, where maybe some of the tightening of supply is versus areas of not so much need, what the department actually looks like, give you some context about how many schools there are, where they're located, some of the benefits of working for us, how to apply for some of these positions, what support is on offer, and how to connect with our public schools, both individually and collectively. So initially, just some context, as I mentioned, we staff over 817 public schools spread across all of Western Australia. And as you can appreciate, that's a huge area. It's over 2.5 million square kilometres. So it takes a huge team of over 50,000 staff members to facilitate that. And of those 50,000, about 25,000 or 26,000 are actual classroom teachers, and the remainder are support staff. So, people working in head office or in regional offices around WA, and their role is to support what we do at the coalface, what we do, our bread and butter, which is educating students. We have around 310,000 students currently registered with WA Public Schools, and they are spread across those 817 plus public schools, and that's broken up into the 8 different educational regions, as you can see on the screen. Okay, and we can separate those into the different areas, including the metro area, which you can see down the bottom of the screen there, North Metro and South Metro. That's split essentially at the Swan River, if you know or have heard of where that is. That's just a nice way of knowing where the different schools are. And although it's sort of managed collectively, if you like, across the state, those different educational regions do have their own regional office, if you like, which also supports those schools. Okay. It is important to note that we do educate over 26,000, currently 26,000 Indigenous Australian students across our schools, and we're very proud and very happy to have those students on board and look forward to working closely with them in the future. So right now, what you're probably more interested in is the nuts and bolts of the jobs, where the jobs are at the moment. Well, as you can see on the screen, I've listed some of the key areas initially. So the secondary teaching realm, so the high school setting is where we're seeing the most common demand for teachers. And typically it's those STEM subjects, so your maths and science in particular. We're really seeing a constant need for teachers in those areas, but also there's a trend now into hiring of or undersupply of English and HASS teachers in the secondary setting. So if that's a learning area that you are already qualified in or are qualifying in, that's fantastic. We look forward to you graduating and looking for work. We should almost certainly be able to offer you a role in some form. But also if you're in the primary school setting or ECE in the early childhood education, we are definitely still looking to employ teachers in those areas, in the metro area, but also in particular those regional and rural towns. So if you've ever thought about working and living in a regional centre, whether it be somewhere large like Kalgoorlie or Geraldton or Carnarvon, or somewhere smaller like Mount Magnet or Merredin. There's some great opportunities out there, and if you're just starting out as a graduate teacher, you might find that that's a great way to establish yourself and get your foot in the door to get that initial experience that you might need to apply and be successful in applying to a more competitive location like a metro school, for example. So myself, I taught at Karratha Senior High School in WA. My colleague Yusuf taught at Headland Senior High School and a Wheatbelt school as well. And we both had a fantastic time. We both did it straight out of university. So it was our first 2 years of teaching. It was a great way to build your repertoire of skills, great way to see the state, a good way to really build up that knowledge base, that experience. And when you then return to the metro area or move on to another location and you start to apply for these jobs, the principals recognize that work that you've done and being in those regional towns and settings as being really high value to your resume. So it's certainly another string to your bow, if you like, that you can put in your resume. We have a couple of programs I'll touch on as well. Elite program, you may have heard of this before or might not have. Essentially, it was a program initially designed to help facilitate the movement of year 7 students from primary school to the secondary school setting. And so what they did is they would take the primary school teachers that taught those year 7 students and then retrain them at the cost of the department, retrain them or upskill out those teachers into a specialty high school area like English or maths or science, okay, at the cost of the department. But the program has become it was so successful and it was so well received, and it's been, a lot of praise for that program. They've expanded it and opened it up to all teachers who are interested in retraining into another area, particularly an area of undersupply. So if you're currently an ECE teacher or a primary school teacher and you like the idea of being an English teacher or a maths teacher or a HASS teacher in high school, you can apply to the ELITE program. And if you are successful, the Department of Education will pay for your qualification, which typically will be another 1 year at university. They will pay for, if you're working in a school, they'll pay for a relief teacher to allow you to be released from the school to go and do some study or to do an exam, etc. And also you can apply for positions and win positions in your new learning area before you actually complete that course. You can do it while you're doing the course, okay? So yeah, it's a great program, as I mentioned. And if you think about it, if you complete the program, it makes you really employable because you've got two qualified areas that you can teach in. So it's definitely something to look at. The links will be in the chat box potentially by the end of my little session now, or at least come and talk to us in the booth afterwards if you would like some more information. The Teaching Flying Squad, myself and Yusuf personally run this, coordinate this program. Essentially, it's a pre-screened pool of teachers that we have that we use to send out to our schools in regional areas around WA and support them with short-term placements. So, for example, in Perth, if there is or in a metro area, if there is a teacher that goes down at short notice sick, the school can just contact a relief teacher to come in and fill that spot until that teacher can return to work, whatever reason, and that's fine. However, in some of our rural areas, our regional areas, the schools and the towns don't have access to those relief teachers to do that. So if a teacher is ill or needs to take leave for whatever reason, we need to supply a relief teacher from Perth. Okay, so we'll fly you up there at the cost of the department. We will put you up in appropriate accommodation. Again, the cost is covered by the department. All you need to do is to show up and to get involved and to get teaching. The contracts there are for a minimum of 4 weeks, so you do need to commit for 4 weeks, and they're up to 10 weeks, so it can be up to a term in length. And by the very nature of the flying squad, it's like a flying relief pool, if you like. It can be quite short notice, so you would need to be prepared to leave with 2 or 3 days notice, okay? If you are dead set on staying in the metro area, it's no secret that casual or relief teaching is a great way to establish yourself as an educator and get yourself into a school and establish yourself as a teacher in a school. that's fine. That's a great way to do it. There's no central pool though for hiring relief teachers, so it's not organised through central office like some of the other fixed term pools and graduate teacher pools are. You just need to contact the schools that you would like to work at individually, and introduce yourself and make contact that way. Okay, speaking with the relief coordinator and going that way. And of course, we do have a variety of different workloads: fixed term, permanent, part-time, full-time, and everything in between. So some of the benefits of working with WA Public Schools, well, I guess, essentially the main point I'd like to make, rather than going through all these dot points on the screen because of time, we are a very large employer. We are the largest employer of teachers in the state. Therefore, that allows us to offer, I guess, a few perks that maybe some other employers couldn't offer. So for example, as you saw earlier, we have over 817 public schools in WA, plus we have central office, plus we have regional offices. They are essentially workplaces that are available to you throughout your career if you choose to move around, if that's something that you want to do. And if you're graduating in your mid-20s and you think, retirement age is at 65, you've got 40 years in the workforce, that allows you great flexibility to move around and do different things under the same banner of public education, whether that's staying in the classroom or doing different support roles in a school setting or in a regional office. There's a whole bunch of different roles that might be for you, okay? We have a very attractive salary progression schedule, I think, that you'll see on the next slide. In addition to that, a variety of allowances depending on where you teach, what stage you're at in your teaching. If you're a graduate, you get a certain allowance as well. And we have established pathways to permanency, which I'll touch on in a few slides' time. And just lastly there, that graduate teacher induction program that's mentioned there, you should have already heard of it by now, I'm sure. But essentially, it's a 2-year program that aligns with the AITSL standards, and the idea is that over those first 4 semesters that you do teach, the program will succinctly run so that on the completion of those 4 semesters, you can jump straight onto full registration, okay? It's a great program, numerous different little initiatives that they do with it. For example, you get to meet other teachers along the way that are on a similar pathway to you, so people in the same stage as you. You get to meet up and discuss the various things that you've been doing, both good and bad. You can share some stories about what worked well and what didn't work so well in your classroom. And it's a great informal way just to touch base with other graduates in the same situation as you. Also, it aligns with like a mentoring program. They'll attach a mentor to you, and they'll come out and visit you in your classroom at your school, no matter where you are in the state, and offer you that support. And they'll offer you feedback on your teaching if you like, or they'll just listen to any issues that you might have. They can provide you with links or further information if you need it, if you need more support. Yeah, it's just a great non-judgmental way to get that extra support initially, particularly in your first 12 months, that first year when you're straight from university into teaching. It can be quite a big culture shock and quite a big workload that you need to adjust to. The guys and girls at the graduate teacher induction program are really good at helping you through that initial phase and help build that capacity and skill in the classroom. Oh, and just on that, on your first position as a teacher, you should automatically basically be put on that program. The principal should register you for that. If that doesn't happen, you can register yourself. That's fine. There's a great team at Padbury that will do that, and I'll put the link in the chat box as well before we finish. But otherwise, if you just Google Graduate Teacher Induction Program WA, you'll find the links for it as well. Great. Okay, so as mentioned, the salaries table you can see on the screen. It starts off 2.1, 2.2. Quite often we get asked, what does those increments mean? Well, essentially, if you are 4-year trained, your first year of teaching will be 2.1, so $72,137. If you are 5-year trained, you will start and commence on 2.2, as you can see on the screen. And regardless of whether you start on either increment, you will attract that $1,600 graduate allowance per year for the first 2 years. And that is essentially to recognise those initial costs with establishing yourself as a teacher. So maybe some magazine subscriptions, some textbooks, some whiteboard markers, whatever you need to get yourself going in the classroom. Now, moving up the pay rates, the 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, they are just natural yearly increments. So for each year of service that you provide with the education department, you will move up those increments, okay? All the way up until senior teacher, where you need to complete 10 years as a classroom teacher, and then complete some school-based professional learning, okay? And you'll attain the senior teacher. Beyond that, however, it becomes merit-based select. So you need to go through some kind of a recruitment process, probably an interview process as well, maybe submit a portfolio of work, and then win that position and be appointed, okay? So if you haven't heard of level 3 classroom teacher before, essentially that was created to recognise the great work that some of these teachers that we have were doing in the classroom. But what we're finding is that some of those really exceptional mentoring, really high level teachers were moving on, I suppose, up the scale to head of department and deputy and beyond, because they wanted more of a challenge, or they wanted to develop their skills or whatever reason. So we wanted to keep some of these teachers in the classroom to help do that great work with teaching kids, but also mentor new teachers that were coming through. So to try and, I suppose, offset that lure of a higher salary in different roles, we've created the level 3 classroom teacher, and you can see the different salaries there. That is merit-based select, which means you need to go through some kind of an interview or portfolio-based process. There is no minimum time required to serve or to teach to get to that level, but because of the rigor in the application process, it's generally understood that you would need to have worked for at least 4 or 5 years as a classroom teacher to get the body of work required to be successful in applying for that position. Okay, beautiful. As mentioned earlier, the graduate teacher program, there's the email on the screen actually, if you want to contact them, but it should be automatic. The principal should put you on this program when you commence at the school as your first year. But if not, there's the phone number and the email there if you need it. Okay, cool. So a couple of different programs we have to help staff our schools around the state, particularly our country schools, is the country teaching program, as you can see on the screen, or the CTP. There's a couple of different perks or different allowances, I suppose you could call it, that go along with that. So the first one there, pathway to permanency. If you complete 2 years of service in a CTP school, in a country teaching program school, you will be awarded permanency attached to that school or to the last school that you were at in the second year. All right. So for example, if you did 1 year at Karratha Senior High School, which is part of the program, and your second year at Kalgoorlie Boulder Community High School, you would win or be awarded permanency attached to Kalgoorlie Boulder Community High School. Or you could just complete 2 years at one particular location like Carnarvon Community College and get permanency attached to Carnarvon. Okay. Now, if you decide to move on and leave that location, you do not take your permanency with you with this program. Okay. So it is only while you remain at the school. Some allowances on the screen there. As you can see, I won't go through them individually, but essentially the further you are, I guess, away from Perth, the further you are away from maybe some of the larger towns, your allowances will increase, and the closer you get, they will decrease. So it just depends on the location. There's too many for me to go through, but you can see the variation on the screen. With the CTP, you will also be awarded subsidised housing and transport. So we will move you to the location with removals, and we will move you back to where you were from originally at the completion of your contract. While you're there, we'll give you provide you with subsidised housing. So, for example, you might pay, instead of a $400 or $500 a week in rent, you might be able to get the subsidised housing down to around $200 or $250 a fortnight, which is very competitive, and it certainly makes for a big financial gain as well in these locations. I also believe you get one return flight as well back to Perth or back to your original location as well per year. So there are 146 schools that are part of the program, regional and rural schools. Some examples are, like I mentioned, Headland Senior High School, Carnarvon, Collie, Broome, Harvey. These sorts of locations are part of the program, okay? Pets can also be accommodated in most circumstances. Sometimes, depending on the location, it might not be safe for the animal, or it might not be appropriate to have an animal in that location. So you would not be allowed to take your pet, but we would make that aware to you at the time of appointment, so that you can make a decision based on that information. So I guess moving on from that, the next level for the initiatives of staffing our country schools is a remote teaching service, or the RTS. There are 37 remote teaching service schools in the program, and they're mainly around the Kimberley, Pilbara, Goldfields area. I'll show you a graphic on the next slide, which will show you the locations of those schools in particular. But just the detail here with the permanency, similar to the CTP we just looked at, the permanency here, you are awarded after 3 years, but it is attached to the Department of Education. So if you do move, or when you move on from that location, you will be assigned a case manager who will work with you to relocate you to another school that you agree with the case manager to move to. Okay, you can't pinpoint a school individually, if you like, to move to after the contract's finished. That just wouldn't be appropriate. It just wouldn't work. However, you can request a region, an educational region, and the case manager will work with you to move you to that location. As you can see, again, various allowances on the screen, depending on challenges in getting to that location, distance to major centres, distance to infrastructure, etc., will be the difference between the different allowances, the different levels. Again, I couldn't go through all the individual ones right now. However, as I mentioned, you can investigate that further. If you like, you can give us a call, and I'll put the number on the in the chat box before we finish today. Housing and transport is actually included in this program. So you do get free housing. You will get transport included. So it will remove you to the location and move you back again at the end of your time. And you also, I believe, receive 2 return flights a year to this location from your hometown. Okay. There are some significant leave entitlements as well. So on top of your 12-week school holidays, after 3 years, you will receive 55 days paid leave on top of your 12 weeks leave. And if you stay for 1 more year and complete a 4th year in the location, you will receive an additional 55 days as well for that final year. So if you stay for 4 years, you get your 12 week school holidays every year, and then in the final year you'll get 110 days annual leave as well. So that's quite significant. Appointment is merit select, so you will need to apply to the job advert and then be selected. And the job advert is displayed, or will be displayed, on the jobs website. You can see on the screen. That is where all of our positions are listed. So I really suggest that you get on board there and have a look and explore the advert and how the website works. As you can see on the screen, the RTS schools, all 37 of them, are located particularly around that Kimberley region, Pilbara and throughout the Goldfields. So the main cluster is around that Fitzroy Valley area, as you can see on the screen, and the Goldfields as well. So this cluster of schools on the right-hand side here, just to give you an idea of how, I suppose, remote and how much of an adventure some of these school and locations are. This cluster of remote schools is actually on the east side of Kalgoorlie. So if you have been to Kalgoorlie and you understand and appreciate how I suppose far it is from Perth, these schools are on the other side of that. Okay, so it's quite an isolated adventure and very unique experience that you could go on. And yeah, hope it's something that you do consider, because it's a great collegiate atmosphere, and the kids are fantastic out in these locations. And I think you would find it very rewarding, as many people report back to us that they do after they spend some time out in these locations. Okay, so how do you apply to these various roles and jobs? Well, all of our positions are advertised through the jobs.wa.gov.au website, as you can see on the screen, whether it's individually advertised positions or our pools, our graduate teacher pool, fixed term teacher pool, and the RTS service pool, which I just spoke about. They are all listed on that website. So it's really important that you get yourself onto that website, regardless if you're looking for a job right now or whether you are just in the planning stages, and just get familiar with how to use that website, what the adverts actually look like, what's some of the wording, what are the key points, how do I apply, what information do I need to provide, all those things. The more across that you are and the more confident you are in addressing those things, ultimately the more competitive you're probably going to be. So, but you will need a resume, a cover letter, course results, teacher registration board number, or at least an application receipt to say that you have applied. Okay. Some photo ID and a working with children check will also be required. And we put that on there just to make sure that you've got all the information you need so that when you do apply, there's no delay. You can just get straight on there and into the pools or applying for the positions. So with the graduate teacher pool specifically, which is probably what most of you will be interested in, it's an online application. As you can see, it is on that jobs board. Okay, so it's just, I'm just talking about the graduate teacher pool here on that jobs board. More information is on the website on the screen, but once you get into the application process of the graduate teacher pool, this is where you can start nominating what locations you'd like to be considered for, ticking the boxes of which qualified subject areas that you can teach, what work fraction you would like to be open to working, and what sort of interests you also can bring to the role. Okay, so with the nominated locations, depending on where or how stringent I suppose you are about where you'd like to work, you can actually highlight different educational regions, the 8 different regions, or you can select individual schools. But I'd just like to really emphasize that again, being new to the role of teaching, you should be really open to working in different areas, or at least traveling to work. And not necessarily just talking about regional towns and rural towns, but also in the metro area. Don't get too stuck up on working at your local school. Be open to traveling 20 or 30 minutes to get to a work location. That's more than reasonable, I think, to be open to doing. So just take some real time to apply or to nominate as broadly as you can those work locations. Okay, and similar to your work fractions, it will allow you to select full-time work, part-time work, 2 days a week, 4 days a week. Don't get too stuck on, I just want to work full-time 5 days a week. At least allow yourself to be considered for other roles, whether it be 3 days a week or 4 days a week, because you could always be topped up with some relief work or job share work at another local school. Okay, and always list any additional interests that you might have, because it could be the difference between just getting that role or not. So if you do have a special interest in basketball coaching or sailing or scouts or whatever that might be, put that in there as well, or highlight that as well, because the school might have a special program based on that particular area and you might just fit into that perfectly. So put that in there as well. And just a last little tip there, making sure that you check all the spelling and grammar, because once you submit your application, the principals can see whatever you've submitted. So if you've made a spelling error or a grammar error or the formatting isn't perfect, it's gonna leave an impression, good or bad. So please double check everything, and once you submit it, be really confident that you've done the right thing there. Upload everything as requested as well to facilitate that as quickly as possible, so there's no delays. Be as flexible as possible. I've touched on that. You can update your application at any time. So if you're a graduate teacher, you probably don't have a huge amount of experience. So as you do more and more relief work, you're going to gain a huge amount proportionately to your existing experience. So make sure you go back into your resume and upload that information. Okay. And lastly, a cover letter is not necessary, but it's certainly advantageous when applying to the graduate teacher pool. And we just say that because not everybody who applies in the graduate teacher pool does actually write a cover letter, but it's a great way to really get across to the principal what you are about, personally, what you can bring to the role, I suppose, above others, and really get across that personal pedagogy you've got of teaching. So we really recommend that, even though it's not mandatory, that you do submit a cover letter as well. Okay. Now, I'm not sure, Taylor, if we should finish up or what's the rules around time.
Yeah, we have gone a little over. How much more you could save some of this information perhaps to share in your booth, or
Okay, that's
yeah.
fine. I've got another half an hour probably. So,
Yeah, we might look to wrap it up then and then just save that information. The students that are here, yeah, feel free to jump into Paul and the team's booth.
sure.
But yeah, awesome. Wow. Thanks for that presentation, Paul. That was a great little insight. It sounds like an awesome opportunity to get involved with as well.
No worries.
Cool. Yeah, as I sort of mentioned before, if any of your students have any questions for Paul or Yusuf, backtrack, save those questions, keep them in your mind, and fire away when you go back into the virtual hub and start going exploring some of the employers' booths as well. Paul, thank you very much for joining the panel, mate. I appreciate it, and yeah, thanks for your great presentation.
Thank you. All the best.
Awesome. Have a good day, everyone, and enjoy it.